The fact that it is Father's Day, we have just a few things that we want to deal with. And the first question that today we have is, who is the youngest father present today? Anybody under 100? How many are under 40? Under 50? Okay, go ahead and stand up. Do you guys know each other? You're younger than you. Okay. So Todd, we have a gift for you here. First of all, the youngest father ever was this young man here that got his girlfriend pregnant when he was 12. Now, I want you to know the rest of the story, is that he has spent most of his life in jail since this time, and she's married to another, they live in England, and she's married to another gentleman on with her life, but that was an indication of what kind of life. Yes, just not very church. Next question, who is the oldest father present? Homer, are you over 50? Nah. I think Homer wins this. How old are you, Homer?
96 years and 8 months.
96 and 8 months. You keep track, huh? What I'm giving out are these little toys. Mini machines they're called. So,
thank you much. Very nice.
Anybody want to guess who the man was, the oldest man when he fathered a child? It was this gentleman. He was 94. Wife was 52. You can pronounce his name if you want. Next question, who is the father present with the most children? Now, not the children are present, but who has the most children that's here today? How many of you have 5? 4? 3? No, they have to be. They don't have to be here. You're here. If you're not here, don't respond. So anybody that has 4 children?
I was father of 5.
5? How many you got, Dick? 4? So we're going to win another set of... Don, how many?
5.
5? Well, get your hand up. Come on. It's going to have to be higher than Marge's head. Okay. 5? Is that going to be the most? Is 5? Okay. When you can't mow yard, Don, then we got something here for you to play with. Homer, since you already won one, or Dick, you had 5 too, didn't you? 4. Okay. Yeah, he's got 5, but he's already won one.
Got a daughter-in-law with me today.
Okay. The father that I found on the internet with most children was this man's name. Anybody want to guess? Now this is from multiple wives and concubines. How many children this man had?
31.
What?
34.
34? Now if the internet is correct, I guess we can't question that. He had 367 children. 525 sons and 342 daughters. The only thing that was in my mind was family reunion. Can you imagine what that would have been like? So, okay. Who is the tallest father present today? Merle, how tall are you, Merle? How tall are you?
6.
6 even? Anybody taller than 6 foot? You're kidding me. I don't want to give Merle somebody, stand on your tippy toes. Well, Todd's already won one though, so. 6 foot? Okay. Well, you and Todd can just have a blast this afternoon. And I'm going to win the prize with the best-looking grandchildren. The tallest father actually lives in Alton, Illinois. He was 8 foot 11 inches tall and weighed 439 pounds and died at the age of 22. He had a gland difficulty that he was encountering. Who's the shortest father present? How tall are you, Rick?
7'2".
7'2"? And my sermon this morning is online. How tall are you, Richie?
5'7".
5'7". Anyone shorter than 5'7"? Just don't want to admit it. Get out here. If you can't get out of package, call someone. Shortest father, I don't know about father, but the shortest man is this gentleman, 21.5 inches tall, and he's 72 years old. I think that we're done. If you want to turn your Bibles to Matthew chapter 1, we're going to, there's a lot of descriptions about different fathers in the Bible, and just downstairs we talked about Jacob in the book of Genesis. Jacob probably was one of the worst fathers there ever was in the beginning. Okay, we know about his favoritism toward Joseph and all that came from that, and one of the greatest struggles that a lot of people have is the fact that when we have parents showing partiality to certain children over others, that creates a lot of problems. And I was thinking about Jacob, but it seems like most of the times when we have someone talk on Father's Day, they kind of rake fathers over the coals. I still have to believe there's a lot of good fathers around. I know that our society doesn't see it that way. I know that the influence of the presence of a father is diminished. Do you remember years ago when Dan Quayle made that statement about Murphy Brown? How many of you remember that? He was vice president, and she was, the show Murphy Brown, where she was on her own raising a child. Do you remember that? And he made some remark that got him in all kinds of trouble about the immoral aspects of that. And then we're finding out many, many years later that Dan Quayle was right. Okay? That I know there are single mothers, and I know circumstances are different, and I know that there are those that are doing well. I remember that when Danny went to Bahrain for about 4 or 5 days, and Brooke had Isaiah and Noah by herself, that one of the things that she said is what great appreciation she has for single moms. That she knew that Danny was only gone for so long, and he was going to be back, but for a mother to raise children all by herself, she certainly had a lot of praise for them. But I still know also that God made father and mother on purpose. That's the way it's supposed to be. And the great thing that's so important is the presence of that father. So as I was thinking about all of this, I began to think about the one person in the Bible, Joseph, that is the father that God chose for his son. And what characteristics are there in the life of Joseph that, I think it's amazing, and we could look at both sides of this, that God could look down and find this young lady that was holy and reverent enough to have his son, but also find this gentleman that also had those characteristics that God would entrust his son to him. There was a Sunday school class in which the teacher said to the children to draw a picture of God. And after a while, as she began to look, she saw this one picture. And she asked the little girl who that was, and she said, I didn't know what God looked like, so I just drew my dad. Okay? There is and we've talked about this downstairs in our Sunday school class, and something that I've seen through the years, that children will love their mother, but they will follow their father. You know, we've always heard that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and that's absolutely correct. That we can start seeing that as we go along, the importance of the Father that is there. And I think it's very significant that God chose Mary to be the mother of his son, but he also chose Joseph to be the father. Where was there a person that would be reverent enough to be the father, the stepfather, the earthly father of the Son of God? But notice this, that the birth of Jesus, the conception of Jesus was miraculous. No man was involved in Mary becoming pregnant. But even Jesus, even the Son of God, God saw the need of a father, an earthly father, to influence and to guide and to protect his own son. What does the Bible tell us about Joseph? Well, in these verses that we're going to look at here in Matthew chapter 1 and Matthew 2, and there's going to be a couple other places that we can refer to, that we're going to see what God saw in Joseph that caused God to believe that he could entrust his son to Joseph. If you would look, and I know it's not Christmas time, but we're going to read this anyway. Beginning in chapter 1, verse 18 of Matthew. This is how the birth of Jesus Christ came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be with child through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was a righteous man and did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. But after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said to the prophet. The virgin will be with child, will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded him, and took Mary home as his wife. But he had no union with her until she gave birth to a son, and gave him the name Jesus. Now if you would turn to verse 13 of chapter 2 of Matthew. We're going to see another reference to Joseph here. We're going to read verses 13 through 23. When they had gone, speaking of the wise men, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said to the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted because they are no more. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who are trying to take the child's life are dead. So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judah in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said to the prophet, he will be called a Nazarene. We see Joseph here. One of the things that caught me as I read this, folks, is that Joseph, as far as Scripture is concerned, never says a word. We don't see one recorded word from Joseph during this whole thing. But the example that he sets, okay? So we're going to look here at Joseph and what is a key ingredient as far as that's concerned. It was kind of like three boys that were talking, and they were living in this big city, and one of the boys said, you know, my dad knows the mayor of this town. And the second boy said, well, that's no big deal. My dad knows the governor of the state. And the third boy said, that's no big deal. My dad knows God. And what we see about Joseph is, first of all, that he was a righteous man, a righteous father. But in order to look at this, we want to understand that Joseph we find him in the middle of this personal crisis. Okay? And even before the angel speaks to Joseph, we see a reaction from Joseph that is very unique, very interesting. Okay? So he and Mary are engaged, if we can use the common terminology. And when you became engaged in the Jewish culture, you were married. You didn't live together, there was no sexual relationship, but you didn't call the engagement off. That once you came to this point, and also that we have to remember that most of these marriages are arranged marriages. In other words, Joseph's mom and dad got together with Mary's mom and dad and said when they get old enough, they're going to get married. Okay? Now, what do you guys think about that? No? You wouldn't want your parents to choose who you were going to get married to? How many of you would be okay if that's what happened? No? Okay, I just wondered. Because in our society we have to fall in love and get married, right? Anybody know what the divorce rate is in our country? Between 45 and 50%. Now it has dropped because there's a great number of people who aren't even getting married. So when they live together for a while and they break up, there's no divorce record. In countries still, Japan was like this until just a few years ago, and there are other countries that have these arranged marriages. You know what the divorce rate is in these countries? Between 2 and 3%. Maybe somebody's got it right and somebody's got it wrong. Okay? So they are engaged. It's the same as being married. And you guys, put yourself in this spot, if you could, that you and your girlfriend are going to get married one day, and all at once she's pregnant. And you know it's not yours. What's your reaction? Anybody? How would you react? Well, you're going to react somehow. Charles, what are you going to do? I'll put you in a spot here. What? Walk away. Okay? Do you think you might be a little angry? If this girl that's betrothed to you to be your wife is pregnant with somebody else's baby, do you think you might be a little brokenhearted, angry, vengeful, walk away? That would probably be our response, wouldn't it? Okay? And Joseph would have every right to take Mary out in the middle of the town and say, look what she did, and he was going to divorce her. Okay? But what was his reaction? Was he going to divorce her? Yeah, but how? Anybody? Yeah, very privately. He didn't want to humiliate her. He didn't want to embarrass her. So very quietly, he would just write this decree of divorce, and that would be the end of that. Now, I don't know of too many guys that would react that way. I think that their pride would be hurt so badly, they'd make sure everybody in town knew what had happened. And they would drag her through the mud, this whole thing. But even in the beginning, you see what kind of guy Joseph is? No wonder God chose him to be the father of Jesus on earth. You see, the key to being a father is first being a good person. Okay? You know, I've gone through this with young people over and over and over again, and they'll want to get married, and I will ask them, what is the very basis of a good marriage? And their answer would be what? Love. We're in love. Okay? I'm not sure what that term means anymore. But the basis of a marriage is trust, it ain't love. And we have these guys, unfortunately, several that I know of, that just can't be trusted. You know, there are times, and I'm a little more vocal about this than what I used to be, because it's something that has always bothered me, but it continues to bother me. We will have couples that will be in need of help from our food pantry, which no problem at all. Everybody at times needs to have some kind of help, don't we? Okay? So they call and they are in need of some food, and I'll go downstairs, and maybe there's 4 or 5 people involved in this, and when I have the boxes up here on the steps for them to come and get it, the guy sits in the car while she comes up to get the food. Now, I'm sorry, I have a problem with that. How hungry are you? How badly do you need this? And so I've come to a point where I'm old enough gray hair now, that I can point and say to the girl, tell him to come in here and get a box of food. He's younger than I am. Okay? But here we see, and I know there's a lot of good guys around, and here we see in Joseph that he's a good man. He could have publicly just destroyed Mary, but he chose not to do that. He wanted to do what was the right thing. So he is a righteous man, which means, you know, a father is someone who's supposed to instruct, supposed to influence, supposed to inspire the children, not beat them down, not wish he hadn't had them. I've heard guys say that to their children, well, I wish you were never born. You really messed up my life. Wow, how do you think that makes the kids think, Dan? Wow, oh yeah, okay? And we see a lot of kids like that, okay? He's to be in a position of authority, okay? He is there to provide and to protect his family, that our homes are to be a place of safety, of security, and that's basically falls upon the father's responsibility. To provide physical and material things, absolutely. You know, there's not a one of us that doesn't want our children to have better, but I've learned that doesn't necessarily mean more. That we want them to have what is best for them. And we can supply the material, the physical things. I got a Father's Day card from Danny yesterday, and it basically said, when I think about all that you did through the years as I was growing up, and you open it up and it says, why did I ever move out? But if the physical and material things are all that we provide, guys, we have failed to be fathers. What about the emotional needs? What about the spiritual needs? What about those things that are going to last for a long time? You know, with my boys, I never cared what area of work they went into. That was never concerned. The only thing that I would teach them is do the best you can do at what you're about to do. Don't be so busy making a living that you fail to make a life. Don't go after the material things, because eventually they don't matter. And I hope and pray that that gets through to the boys as they get older and older. Scott Stapp was the lead singer of a group called Creed. I don't know how many of you remember that group. And he had a son named Jagger, and he wrote a song. And if you listen to the words of this song, I think they're amazing. It is called Arms Wide Open. Do you remember that song? That was to his son. And he's saying to his son, I hope you have more than I had. I hope you're not bound by those things that bound me. I want you to be free, that you can take this life by the hand. I won't sing it to you because I see Lisa's scared right now that I want to. But it's a great song, isn't it, Lisa? It's a great song. And I hear all these people listening to it, but it's to his son, that he would have more than Scott had. And that's a story in itself about Scott Stapp. But we ought to be role models. Okay? Guys, I don't care who you are. Right now, you are a role model to somebody. You're the father figure to somebody. May not be your family, but somebody is looking at you saying, I'd like to be like him. I want to be like him. And it's so important for us to understand that. So therefore, we have to show them, not just tell them. There was a gentleman that he and his family lived on a farm, and they had this bumper crop of grain, and they were ready to harvest that grain. And in the midst of all of this, a big storm came. And the crop, just days before it could be harvested, was destroyed completely. There would be no harvest. And he remembers walking out with his father to look at this cornfield that was just completely demolished. You know, Dad owed the bank. All these creditors, all this money that he owed, now his harvest is gone. And he said, I expected Dad to stand there and look at that and just curse and rant and rave. But he said, as I stood there with my dad, I heard him softly start singing, Rock of Ages, cleft for me. Let my soul, whatever the words are. And he said, years and years later, I never forgot that. He said, that was the greatest sermon I'd ever heard in my life. Because in the midst of all of this, he did not tell his son about faith. He showed him what faith was. And that is what people are looking for us in our lives, is to show them what faith is. Not just talk to them about it, but to show the example of that. Fathers are not as smart as they think, but they are a lot smarter than their children think they are. Mark Twain? Todd, you want something to share with all of us? I just saw you laughing. I thought I saw Dick about ready to get up and walk out. That's all right. Mark Twain once said when he was 16 years old, his father was the dumbest man in the world. And when he turned 21, he surprised how much the old man had learned in 5 years. Dads, our children are going to grow up to be like us. Period. That's the way it's going to work out. There may be an exception here and there, but for the most part, I've just seen it. I've just seen it. Don't you start seeing characteristics of your father in you? And you start, oh, there goes Todd again. I'll quit embarrassing you, Todd. Okay. But to begin with, Joseph is a righteous father, and the second thing we see, he was a responsible father. He clearly demonstrates the role of father is very important. You know, when we think that God saw and knew the need of his son having a father on earth, that should be enough said. If Jesus, the Son of God, in all his perfection, still needed a father as he was growing up, that ought to say everything that needs to be said here. Even before God spoke to him, Joseph had no vengeance, no bitterness against Mary. He understood clearly then, after the dream, what God expected of him, that he was ready to obey. Do you think this was easy for Joseph and Mary? Here they are not married. She's pregnant. What would be the talk down at the coffee shop in town here if that was the case? You realize all this that these poor people went through. And Mary? Mary was young. Joseph, we're not sure. There's differing opinions. But Mary's a little teenage girl. She was probably 13 or 14 years old. Can you imagine the scandal that was going on and all that? But he stuck with her, didn't he? He stayed there with her because he was responsible. And I would say that if there's one thing that we need in our world today, are fathers that are responsible, that own up to their responsibility, that take what has happened. You know, there's a lot of separations with people, but one of the things I say to the wife and the father and the husband both is those are your children. You're still responsible for those children. And so many times I see the guy abdicates that. He just walks away. He's done with it. And here she's left now to fight the battles that she has to go through. Joseph believed. He obeyed God. He accepted responsibility. And dads need to take responsibility to teach their children. But we need to teach them moral values. We need to teach them those things that are going to be really important in their life. Bill Cosby once said that a child's brain is like Jell-O. You better put something good in it before it gets hard. That's why we have to be so dedicated to the youth downstairs that we can put some morals and values that will never leave them. Once they're instilled, they're going to be there. What are our kids being taught? What value systems are they being expected to accept? You tell me, in a recent book by a man named Delmer W. Holbrook that did a lot of research here, what are the 3 things that fathers say most often to their children? Anybody want to guess? No? You're free? Okay. Now I expected one would say, go ask your mother, but that's not one of the top 3. Okay. Number 3, keep quiet. Number 2, we don't have enough money to do whatever. Number 3, I'm too tired. There's a little girl that loved for her dad to read stories to her at night. And after about 5 or 6 stories, he was tired, and he got an audio CD out, put it in a CD player, and said, here, you can listen to the story here. And she said, well, I can listen to the story with the CD, but the player doesn't have a lap for me to sit on. You know, one of the greatest investments that we can give to our children is our time. It's our time, and that's another thing. Not the perfect father here at all, but that's another thing I tried to instill in my sons, is that your children are going to want your time. Not necessarily just a special one day we're going to go out and do all this stuff, but each day, on a regular basis, they want your time. That's what they're after. They want you. And there's stories that I can tell you there from people, a little girl that asked her daddy how much money he made an hour. And he told her at the time he made about $25 an hour. And she went out and did this lemonade stand. And then walked in and gave him $25 saying, I would like to have an hour of your time. What a shame. What a shame that we were so busy. We were so busy. Dads need to be positively active in their children's lives. A little boy that did his math, took it to school the next day, and the teacher marked 3/4 of it wrong. She said, I don't know how one person could make that many mistakes. And he said, it wasn't one person, my dad helped me. We need to be involved. What's going on? What is going on in our children's lives? What is really concerning them? That's what we need to know. Not only within the house, but even after that. That we see here, Joseph was a loving man toward Mary and toward Jesus. Both. This was not his child, but he raised him as his child. And there's a lot of guys that would have a real problem with that. We don't see any resentment there. And Joseph loves enough to discipline. He loves enough to make sure that they're going in the right direction. And with our children, somewhere along the line, we're going to have to fight the battle. If not, it's going to be a mess from the word go. But somewhere along the line, that we're going to have to care enough to say to our children, that's not right. It's wrong. You need to change the direction that you're going. You know, back in the place where Danny lives at, all the backyards join together, and there's really no fences there. So all the kids play back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. And it's a homeowners association. You can say whatever you want about that. But if you get a swing set, it's got to be redwood. If you have a swing or slide, it's got to be green. Okay, and you have to have some kind of mulch or something. I mean, it's pretty strict. You've got, you know, every Johnson County is where they are at in Kansas. Almost every house there is a gray or a beige. That's the code. Even the Walmarts and the stores are gray or beige because that's the code. You can't have anything besides certain colors that they say is okay. So they put this big swing set out, and Danny finds this rubber mulch, which is really just tires that are cut up. And it's quite an interesting deal because how soft it is when you jump on it, it gives, and they're not hurt like they normally would. The problem being, though, is that when the kids jump out of the swings and come down the slide, when they hit that, it knocks some of the mulch out into the grass. And rubber mulch doesn't really break that well. Okay? So we were out there one day picking up out of the grass, picking up some of the mulch, and there's this little boy named Jackson Farnsworth, and his 2 little sisters come and play with Isaiah and Noah, and Jackson is probably about 10 years old. And Danny asked him why all of this mulch gets kicked out. He asked him, would you swing for a little bit, get out of the swing and see how much mulch that you kick out. Okay? So Jackson gets out of the swing and then goes like that and just sprayed it all over Danny, all over me. And he's standing there with a smile on his face. And I said, you know, Jackson, this is not my yard. This is not my home. But you know, if somebody did that to me in my yard, they wouldn't be playing in this yard anymore. That they'd be told to go home. But that's just me. That's just me. And very silently, Jackson just kind of walked away and walked back home. Somewhere along the line, now whether I had the place to do that or not, maybe not. But somewhere along the line, somebody's going to have to draw the line and say, hey, this is not right. This is not the way we operate. This isn't the way that we do things. And we have to tell our children the same thing, no matter what age they might be. Okay? That if, I've told my boys many times, if I didn't love you, you can do whatever you want. But because I do love you, there's certain things I can't let you do without fighting the battle. And somewhere along the line, that needs to be fought. It has to be fought. Too many times I see homes where the children are running the home. And that's where the problem rises then, is that we forget who we are. And guys, when I read my Bible, I don't see any place that I'm aware of, if you do, please let me know, where it talks about the mother standing before God answering for their children. But I can show you places where it says the father will. That I will stand before God, where how I taught my sons, how I led them, what direction I gave them, how I disciplined them. This is so important, so important. Can you imagine if the Lord doesn't come back for the next 300 years, and I'm standing and I'm looking at all the children, the grandchildren, the influence that I had, was it positive or negative? Did I try at least to direct them? And I know sometimes the battle is rough, but folks, somewhere along the line, it's got to be fought. It's got to be fought. If we care about our kids. The final thing is that he was a reverent father. You know, we see the father's the head of the house, the breadwinner, but he's also to be the spiritual leader. And our kids are going to follow our example. I think of Abraham, who was the great father of faith, but by far was not perfect. When he and Sarah go into Egypt one time, he is so afraid that Pharaoh is going to kill him to get Sarah. He tells them, or has Sarah tell them that she's his sister. Well, no big deal, right? But you want to read in the book of Genesis, Isaac does the same thing. And then when we get to Jacob, Jacob's just a liar from the word go. In fact, that's what the word Jacob means, is deceiver. Wonder where they learned to do that. Guys, don't you see in your sons them doing some things that you did and you wish they hadn't? I wish you hadn't learned. You know, I had someone once say that the problem with our children today, they're not listening to the adults. I believe the problem with our children today, they're listening too much to our adults. They're seeing the hypocrisy. They're seeing all those things. And sure, we're imperfect. We're perfect. That's not the point. That's not the point. But I believe that dads, more than anyone else in the world, have the ability to instill their faith and the reverence for God in their children. You know, we've been led a lie in many, many ways here. That we believe that once our children get to maybe junior high age, that their peers are the ones they talk to, and they're the ones that are going to talk, you know, show confidence toward and trust and talk to. And the reality is that's not true at all. I've seen poll after poll after poll that when these children, high schoolers, when they ask who has the most influence over you in your life, their answer is the parents. Still as high schoolers. We think we've lost all influence over them. It's not true at all. They're still looking to us for that leadership. We may lose some battles, but they are worth fighting. It seems that Joseph died prematurely. I'm going by the fact that when Jesus is on the cross, he commands John to take care of his mom. Something's happened to Joseph. I don't know what has happened. That's why there are those that have the idea that he was much older than Mary, but I don't know. But he's not in the picture when it happens here. But it's very obvious from what we read in Scripture that Joseph lived a very honorable life. That Joseph raised his children, and I say children, plural, in the ways of the Lord, and left a legacy for them. You know, I know there are those that hold the perpetual virginity of Mary, but that is not a biblical view at all. It says that Joseph did not have sexual relationship with Mary until Jesus was born. I know that there are times in Scripture where it says that Jesus, your brothers, your mother, and your sister are here to see you. Okay? And I say that about Joseph is because he raised some sons. Two of them, James, book of James, Jude, book of Jude. that he evidently, honorably and very, very much so in faith in God, raised the other children too. That 2 of his children ended up writing books of the Bible because of their faith. Harmon Killebrew was a baseball player for the Minnesota Twins years ago. And he had a baseball diamond out in the front yard. And when they had 7 kids and they were playing baseball, and most of us know that after a while there's bare spots that show up in the grass. And his wife came out one day and complained that the grass was dying there. And he said to his wife, "We're raising children, not grass." That our priorities have to be with our children, what is best for them. Our kids are watching. How will your faith speak to your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren? Somebody is watching. Somebody is listening. And they're going to mirror what they learned from you. They are going to follow the example that you have before them. Many, many years ago, been about 12 years ago now, that my youngest son Danny was on a four-wheeler, had an accident, crushed a vertebrae, could have been paralyzed, but fortunately, and we are thankful to God, he was not. But he had surgery, very involved surgery. And he was in the hospital at Carl for several days, almost a week. In fact, I think we took him down there on a Monday and he came back home on Saturday after surgery. But after he had his surgery, he was in a lot of pain, so they had him on a sedative. He was basically asleep most of that first day. And I put 2 chairs together in the room, and I was sleeping in the room that first night. And in the middle of the night, as I was sitting there, Danny woke up. And I can remember the first words he said. He said, "Dad, are you here?" Well, dads, are we? When our kids cry out to us, when our kids are looking to us and they say, "Dad, are you here?" Are we? Are we? See, before our kids are going to see God in us, we're going to have to allow God to come to be with us. Before, we can't share anything that we don't have. We're not going to be able to share our faith if we don't have faith. So our invitation this morning is a room at the cross for you, a time for us to become honest about our faith. Honest, that we might give our children, not to get them to be religious. I have no interest in my children being religious. I have great interest in my children having faith. Having faith. We're going to stand together and sing There's Room at the Cross for You. It's going to be about 381, I believe, in your hymnal if you desire. And we're going to stand together and sing that and know that for all of us, not just fathers, but all of us, there is room if we want to make an honest confession of our faith. Let's stand together.